Well, first, where do you see humanity headed right now?
Dear friend, how many hours, days, weeks, months, years do you have? Basically, as we've said on many occasions in the past through workshops and study groups, humanity is heading for conflict. And the conflict has a great potential of becoming a global conflict. And by that we mean it's not going to be isolated to a particular region, as a lot of people would like it to be. In fact, it's not going to be a war by proxy, it'll be a war by different players on the planet Earth. You know the major players. You have Russia, you have China, you have North Korea. Even though North Korea is not really a major player, it is still an antagonist and a protagonist. You have Iran, same thing. You have Israel. You have the United States of America. With the recent election in the United States of America, you have a greater propensity for conflict than ever before. So what we suggested quite a few years ago, 6, 7 years ago, basically is happening. The world is moving more and more towards conflict. Having said that, the question is not, will there be a conflict? The question is simply, do we have to be afraid of it? No. When you have a certainty that there's something coming, there's no need to fear it. You must then decide how you want to prepare yourself. A lot of people would say to themselves, well, conflict, as long as it's not around where I am, that's okay. But conflict is conflict, and conflict is not, by its nature, limited to a specific area, as much as individuals would like to see it that way. So this is where it's moving, and from there, of course, eventually, conflicts will end, and certain other individuals or countries will become more powerful, and other countries becoming less powerful. And again, you'll have a period of benefit, a period of where rebuilding occurs and countries become more cooperative with each other. But eventually that too will fall apart. It's basically a pendulum swing. And so don't be concerned. Ultimately, humanity will survive, but whether you as individuals survive, dear friends, that's entirely up to where you are going to be in relation to the conflicts. Do you see?
Mm-hmm. So when you say it's not a question of if, it's a question of when, are the probabilities high that it's sooner rather than later?
Oh, yes. Okay. Absolutely. You don't need us to tell you this. All you have to do is look at your world. You have the United States presently going through a re-examination of itself. It has just elected a very, call it conservative, ultra-conservative, and yet at the same time dangerous government, in which it has focused all of the power in one aspect of itself and has basically neglected all of the aspects that would become inclusive. So it's now moving to a point of exclusivity. You have Russia that has attacked the Ukraine and will continue to attack Ukraine until Ukraine collapses. And then don't kid yourselves, dear friends, Russia will continue westward until it has what it perceives to be its just and valued perspectives. That means that at that point, a lot of countries that are presently in the NATO environment will also be dragged into a war with Russia, which means NATO will have to move itself in, it will have to go in there, which means that the United States will be faced with, do we participate or do we not? Which under the present administration that's going to be coming in, no. Donald Trump will not be looking to go into a conflict, certainly not with Putin. And then you have China, who by its nature is also, in and of itself, looking to take over and overcome Taiwan. And of course, not just Taiwan, but a lot of other countries within what it perceives to be its territorial rights. The Philippines, Indonesia. There's going to be a lot of conflict. And eventually, all of this will transform itself into North Korea looking to gain an advantage over other countries and to flex its muscles and its ability and its superiority. And eventually, it'll include and it could even overwhelm countries like Australia, New Zealand, and in fact, even the United States. They could be dragged into such a war that the United States will be hard-pressed to survive, especially if China decides to invade the United States, which is always a possibility, but never a probability. It's not a high probability. And so, eventually, individuals that are presently looking to become more exclusive will find themselves struggling to maintain that exclusivity, and will have to realize that inclusivity will take them away from conflict as opposed to towards conflict. Do you see the point?
Yeah. And all like the threats that countries make of using nuclear warfare, do you see that they will actually use it?
It's a probability. It's growing. It's not high, but it is growing as the more and more countries start to move against the aspirations of others, and the only weapon that they have is not just the threat of nuclear war, but the use of nuclear missiles, then yes, there's always a higher degree of probability, because some people believe very strongly that if they use nuclear missiles first, they will not be harmed. You see?
Yeah. And like would it involve technological warfare in the sense of like drones versus human soldiers?
That's already happening, dear friend. You have technological warfare happening now. Yes, more and more drones are being used, less and less human resources are being used in certain wars. One of the reasons that, for example, Ukraine is not capable of pushing back Russia is because it's being limited in its use of drones by the countries that could supply drones, such as the United States, Germany, a number of other countries. So they're manufacturing their own drones, which of course don't have the capability that the American drones and German drones have. If they were allowed to, they would have ended this conflict a few years ago. Do you think?
Yeah. And right now, the U.S. is still seen as one of the most powerful countries in the world. Do you see that would change? Somebody would take over as the most powerful?
Yes. Eventually, the United States, the empire of the United States, is going to falter. Democracy as you know it will have to be reinvented. The United States is not the bastion of democracy that it pretends to be. It has a good PR system, we assure you. And yes, it's propagated itself as the bastion of democracy, but it's not. And in fact, there is greater democracy in Europe and other countries than there is in the United States right now. So democracy is an inclusivity, is an inclusive environment, not an exclusive environment, and the United States is moving more and more towards exclusivity. Is it?
Yeah. So even without the war, the U.S. is already on a movement of decline.
On a movement of exclusivity, yes. It's not so much that it's declined, for the one thing that the United States has is the ability to go to war. It is very good at war. It was created through war, and it will survive through war. However, having said that, it's, again, as much as the United States would like to believe that without them, the Second World War would have never ended, We assure you, it's not that the Second World War would never have ended. It would have ended differently, yes, but it would have ended. And yes, Hitler would have eventually been beaten, absolutely. And did the effort of the Americans within the war help? Absolutely. For the Germans were so strong that they had actually almost defeated virtually all of the will of the other countries. However, having said that, it wasn't their ability to fight that won the war. It was the fact that because they entered the war, they put in money and they put in, of course, they supplied a great deal of materials, bombs, planes, boats, submarines, etc., to defeat Germany and its aspirations. But they didn't do it alone. As much as the United States would like to propagate the idea that they themselves were the winners of the Second World War, had it not been for Canada, had it not been for Britain, had it not been for France, none of the wins that occurred would have occurred in the way that they did. Other countries were so involved in this, and they rallied because the United States got involved, finally, and we do say finally, because they, again, were very exclusive until they could no longer afford to be exclusive. Basically, it was on the benefit of all the other countries that brought about the end of the war, for they sacrificed as much, if not more, on a per capita basis than what the United States ever did. Do you think?
Yeah.
But the United States has a great manufacturing capability, great industrial capability, and now it's a great electronically manufactured capability. So yes, the manufacturing capabilities and the machine of manufacturing in the United States can be ramped up. Having said that, though, it is not at this stage being ramped up. Do you think?
Yeah. And when you say that societies would have to rebuild after a war like this, does that mean that this would be even more catastrophic than the Second World War?
Yes. You're faced with different countries being involved. You're faced with new technology, new weapons, and you're faced with almost a different psychology. Majority of individuals in countries other than those countries that are at war are unwilling to sacrifice themselves in order to defeat the warring parties. So rather than support the Ukraine, the majority of the West ignored it until it became obvious that if Russia was not stopped, it would just continue growing westward. But we assure you, it's too late. Do you think?
Okay. Yeah.
And it's not because Ukraine will fall. It is because Russia will go around Ukraine eventually. Do you think?
Yeah. And will there be also damage to the planet as a result of? So everything between climate change, it's all going to impact.
Dear friend, the planetary system called Earth is in a process of change and alteration. You must realize that you don't measure change and alteration on the planet on the basis of dozens of years. You measure it on the basis of millennia. This is just another movement towards another ice age, and this will change. Right now you're getting planet warming. Eventually it'll become planet freezing. Do you think?
Okay. And when you first started speaking to humanity almost 30 years ago now, you at that point were already saying that humanity is moving towards this movement of conflict. And was part of the reason you first started to encourage us to change the trajectory of this direction?
We came through to provide humanity with an alternative perspective of reality in which the opportunity for choice was available. Humans, by their nature, are pessimistic, very pessimistic, and see themselves as not having choice or much choice. And so there was a great deal of, call it judgment, a great deal of fear that was permeating the culture, psychology, the psyche, if you want to call it that, of all of humanity. So we came through in order to assist humanity and provide an opportunity to see something else, something more enlightening, something more expansive. What we've seen, of course, is we've provided the opportunity, but we've seen more and more of humanity insisting on moving into reducing its opportunities. And it's to be honored, it's to be observed. We ourselves have no attachment to the circumstances, the choices. This was done because we were asked to come. And so we did. Do you see?
It seems to me like religion, in a weird way, is stronger than ever, even though humanity has the ability to have all this information available to it now with technology.
It is not stronger. Religion is not stronger than ever. It is actually not as strong as it used to be. It is just that their impact is broader in some ways. In some ways. You see? You go back 300, 400, 500, 1,000 years, religion was much stronger, but the effect was fairly localized. Now, with the advent of technology, communication can take place throughout the planet very instantly, which is why it is viewed as being stronger, the influence of religion being stronger, but it is not. Do you think?
Yeah. What do you see as the movement of religion for the next 50 to 100 years in humanity?
Doesn't matter. We're not going to discuss that because religion is going to continue to expand, and it'll more and more of humanity. It has the opportunity. It looks like it's moving in the direction where humanity will contract. The psychology of humanity will contract, and eventually, of course, become more and more exclusive to itself. Having said that, there is always individuals, including many with pockets of individuals who are willing to be inclusive, and there's always probabilities of changing the course. If there was not a probability of changing the course, we ourselves would not have come through. We came through not because dear Réné asked of it. Dear Réné made himself available to us out of his own choices, but humanity asked us to help it to expand. Humanity, individuals, generations of humanity. So we did, but it wasn't a question of this was a request put out in the last 20 years. This happened hundreds of years ago, before even the world wars. Do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so it doesn't sound like another conflict would truly change the human consciousness, leave a big enough impact.
It'll create opportunity for change. But like all things, humanity, individuals, must choose to change. To look at humanity and say, humanity will not change, or humanity will change, is to say this grandiose idea of that everyone within the human consciousness will be different is going to happen? No. How can you ask or even consider that others will change when you yourselves are not willing to change? Each individual listening to this particular podcast, are you willing to make the choices to manifest yourself in a more inclusive way to your environment, to those around you? Are you willing to love more and to therefore become inclusive to those that you judge as being less than, as not good enough? How many of you are judging Donald Trump and all of his cronies? How many of you are judging Joe Biden and all of his cronies? And how many of you are judging Pierre Trudeau, or not Pierre Trudeau, Justin Trudeau and all of his cronies, and Pierre Poilievre and all of his cronies? And you go on through the world, and Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un and Putin and all of their cronies. Stop judging. If you really want to change humanity, you must change yourselves. So you can't really affect humanity in a sense of, by changing yourself, all of humanity will change. No. But you can make a difference with yourself. And if you make a difference with yourself, others will see that difference, and they may choose to make a difference, change themselves. And if they do, they may choose to make a difference in others, and others may choose to see that as a difference in themselves, and so on and so on. And then things begin. You see? Now this process has begun. It does take a great deal of time because it is not controllable. This is not a process that will occur as a result of control. It'll occur as a result of command, which is why we created this series on control versus command when we first began to speak. Humanity has listened. Some humans have listened to it. Most have not. And humanity is proudly moving forward using control, the same methodology that they've used for thousands and hundreds of thousands of years. To do what? To be more of the same under different circumstances? It's up to humanity. You see the point?
Yeah. That's perfect. Wonders as powerful. Unless you have any other comments, I think
that's basically, it's for people listening to this particular podcast to realize that when they complete this, they listen to this, ask yourselves this question. Do you love yourself enough to be a different person than you have been, no matter how scary it becomes for you, and to look at yourself and say, I can make choices that are more inclusive, and I don't have to be judging all the time, and therefore maintain exclusivity. Now, everybody's going to sit there and say, yes, but wonders you're not talking about, the job that I don't have, or the work that I have to do, or how hard I have to work, or the kids I have to take care of, the cost of food, the cost of housing, the cost of my car. Well, dear friends, why is it that you've all of a sudden brought yourself into this circumstance of existence where you believe very strongly that everything should be given to you? It's available, yes, but why should it be given to you? If you want to expand and become inclusive, you will get. But if you want to stay exclusive, you will find it hard to gain anything. Inflation does not happen by the government. And cost of housing isn't ruled by the government. It's ruled by the people who sit there and say, I want more money for what I've got. And why do they say that? Because they're afraid of not having enough. So look at yourselves, dear friends. Look at your own psychologies. Look at your own belief structures. Are you afraid? Afraid about everything? Afraid about anything? And if you are, how can you become inclusive with that? How can you become one with that instead of thinking of it as outside of you, something that is affecting you? You are the victim, therefore you must react to it. Get out of your mentality of victimization and become a chooser, not a wisher. Those are words we've used many times over the years. Everybody that's listened to us has heard it to some degree or another. And yet, how many of you are choosing? And to you all, the appreciation of all. Well, came out of that session. I came out with a sense that no matter how many times something is repeated, we spend so much time and effort trying to minimize it, poo-poo it, make it something we fight against, that we lose sight of the energy of if we only stopped that and just started to work with it instead, started to change our mindset around it, that our lives would begin to change. Maybe not in great detail, but over time it would. And if we saw that, if we did that for ourselves, wow, what a life we could create. And that's it. That's all I got.